here I am. I'm free in Christ. For freedom, Christ freed me, as I told you 2 weeks ago. And I'm free to do anything I want. And yet, what am I doing? Am I murdering people? No. Am I coveting my neighbor's donkey? Did my neighbor have a donkey? That's awesome. No. Am I committing fornication? No. No, I'm not. Am I wearing horizontal stripes? Oh yeah, dang, see that right there. Freedom does not suddenly make you want to go out and commit crimes and sin against God. In fact, it's just the opposite effect. The law of Moses is actually what makes you do that. The law of Moses does that. The law of Moses says, don't do this, don't do that. And then sin, getting an incentive through that law, Romans 7, makes you want to do it. So it's a paradox. By telling somebody, don't do this, it makes them want to do it. And by telling them they can do it, like me, I can covet all the donkeys I want. If I want to covet a donkey, I'll covet a donkey. The weird thing is I don't really want to covet a donkey. So, and I don't want to commit fornication either. That's really weird. What this tells me is that grace has power. Read the first chapter of Romans, like the first 6 verses. The evangel of God's grace is God's power for salvation. It's powerful. It's really unusual because you can't see it. How can you trust something that you can't see? Law you can see. You know, if you coveted your neighbor's donkey, they threw rocks at you until you died. You know, here's the weird thing though. The weird thing is that like Moses and Paul both tell people not to sin. This potentially stumbles people, you know, because Paul's supposed to be Mr. Grace, and yet there's places in Galatians and in Ephesians where he says, don't do that. Paul even says in like 1 Corinthians 15:34, something like that, sober up justly and do not be sinning. Well, what else is he going to say? I mean, really, nobody wants to hear Paul say, go ahead and sin. Yeah, that's fine. I want you to sin. Go ahead and covet all kinds of stuff. Now, I want you to murder. I want you to commit adultery. I want you to kill your parents. No, we don't want to hear Paul say those things. But neither do we want to hear him come back at us with the law, thou shalt not. So there's a fine line here, isn't there? What does Paul do? How does he handle it? Well, for one thing, Paul doesn't give commands, he gives exhortations. And he gives exhortations based on a fact that Moses never had. Those are my leftover Christmas lights. See those over there? Right there, yeah, those are my leftover Christmas lights. I really want extravagant, right, for Christmas. I haven't taken them down since last year. I really want, like, just put a nail up there and made it kind of look like a Christmas tree. Have a holly jolly Christmas. Yeah, Paul has a little trick up his sleeve that Moses never had, and that is the fact that no matter what you do, you cannot get out of God's favor. That is a little tidbit of information that Moses never had. But Paul says you can do anything you want, and we can hardly believe Paul. You're kidding, Paul. Paul says, no, I'm not kidding. You do anything you want. Can I do this? And the lightning bolt doesn't come. Okay, God, well, what if I do this? The lightning bolt still doesn't come. So you test it and you realize it's really true. And this has a calming effect on you. And so based on the knowledge that grace now reigns, Paul gives us exhortations based on that. It's not that you have to, it's that you want to. And in case you don't know what you should want to do, Paul will tell you. He'll say, okay, you know, don't commit adultery, don't commit fornication. He's still telling you some of the same things, but with an entirely different dynamic. Namely, nothing you can do can get you out of God's favor. And until you know that, until you understand Romans 8:1, that there is now therefore no more condemnation in Christ Jesus, until you understand that, then you will not behave yourself. Paul says in another place, can't think of the verse, the editor will find it, by the grace of God, we behaved ourselves in the world. Isn't that an interesting paradox? That by telling you you can do anything you want, for freedom Christ frees you, it actually makes you want to serve the God who is gracious enough to give you that kind of liberty. And that's the secret of grace, folks. Celebrate it.